One of my roles at WWF is digital transformation, and if I get asked what I do there, this question and finding answers to this question and how we can use technology to save the planet is the simple answer to that. But before we jump into the details on technology, I would like to take the opportunity to give you a little bit of background on what WWF does. Luckily, at least in Switzerland, almost everybody knows us. I will nevertheless provide some information on what we do. Founded in 1961, over 6,000 employees worldwide, 200 in Switzerland, and we have roughly 270,000 supporters here in Switzerland. Most of the people, at least the ones that I speak with, associate us with wildlife, with animals, but there's actually a lot more that we do. These are the 6 global goals that we have. So we want to save the forest, the oceans, fresh water, and we want to work towards sustainable climate and energy use, sustainable food use, and yes, wildlife as well. So all the programs that we have in one way or another support these 6 global goals, but we also have so-called driver practices, and that means that we work with education, with markets, with finance, and with governance, because that's where we see that we get the most leverage out of what we do. And now we come to the technology. What does WWF have to do with technology? Actually, it's quite a lot. Technology has been a huge part in what we do, and it's continuing to grow. We're using sensors, obviously, to track animals, for example. The picture on the left here, we use drones in the Amazonas to spot river dolphins. There's also some AR and virtual reality experiments that we're doing, and we also use sensors and AI in fighting poaching, for example. So some of the buzzwords, Panda Labs is a sort of container where we combine all of the innovative activities that we're doing, the partnerships with universities, for example, and partnerships with companies. I want to show you one example of how we use technology and how we use technology to get the objectives that we want. There's been a case with WWF in Australia around tuna. And there's 2 key issues that you have with tuna. One is illegal fishing. So there's parts of the world where you are not allowed to fish tuna. And the second one is wrong labeling. And there's been a couple of studies that show that a lot of the tuna that you get actually is not tuna. So it's unsure what it is, but it's not tuna, that's for sure. There's been a pilot with WWF Australia that used sensors, so Internet of Things, and blockchain to track information throughout the supply chain. So you actually put a sensor on the fish once you catch it, and that information is put in the blockchain. You scan the fish again when it's in the harbor, you put that in the blockchain. When it gets to manufacturing, you take the huge fish, you take the sensor away, you make out of, I don't know, 20 kilo tuna, you make 20 pieces of it, and each of those pieces gets a QR code, and you can link that individual packages back to the tuna fish. So this was a pilot done, and it was quite successful, and beginning of this year, there's been a new venture for that called OpenSC that WWF and Boston Consulting Group together put into life or created. And that provides a platform using blockchain, using artificial intelligence to provide more transparency to supply chains. Don't worry, I'm not going into the definition of blockchain. I wouldn't dare to do that. I just want to show that slide that this is sort of our thinking of how we can use blockchain or what potential use cases could be. The transparent supply chain one, that's exactly the OpenSC. And the other interesting topic for us is on the bottom right, the ecosystem platforms. And that's what we are thinking about and what I want to show you with the project in Romania. So this is Romania. This part here are the Carpathians. It's also called the lungs of Europe. So it's a huge, very important ecosystem that is in good shape. And what WWF has done is put bisons back into that ecosystem. Why bison? Because bisons have a huge influence on an ecosystem. So it's like a chain reaction. You put the bison back, they change the environment a little bit, they change the whole ecosystem in there, new animals come in, and that's what you want to study and revitalize this ecosystem. So we have 2 rewilding sites there, and currently the main goal of the project is to build up a sensor network to track these animals, get information on where they move, how they move, and use that in a scientific purpose. But we also want to extend that. And this is the project or the idea that we used in the hackathon with ETH. You're not supposed to be able to read this. This is just to make sure that you get the feeling it's a very complex system that we're trying to build. I will just quickly go over it. What we think about, you will have the donors on the top. So there can be individual donors, it can be bigger donors, but somehow money gets in. You have the actual ecosystem on this side, and you have things that you want to measure on that ecosystem. You have certain stakeholders on the ground, like hunters, for example, and then you have the local communities here. And one of the key issues that we want to tackle is managing an ecosystem is, one, very complex, as you can obviously see, and 2, it doesn't work by just putting money in. So experience has shown that just pouring money onto an ecosystem doesn't make things better. So the key thing that we're trying to do is how can we link this together, and how can we use blockchain or new technologies to align what we want to achieve with this ecosystem. So the indicators that we have on the ecosystem, can they incentivize the local stakeholders, and can they improve the communities? And the theory behind this is, or the hypothesis is, that if these stakeholders down here get an incentive on improving this ecosystem, and by doing that also improve the local communities, it sort of runs by itself. That's the hypothesis behind it. So I want to quickly show you what the challenge was. And this is one specific view. This is not the whole picture, but this is one specific view. Let me quickly guide you through this. What we want to be able to do is define a project. So we want to define what are the impact goals that we actually want to achieve. What are the actions that we need to do to achieve those impact goals? And then we have a money pot on top that is needed to do these actions, but we also want to reserve a little bit as a bonus pot. And I will tell you in a second what that bonus pot is for. Those stakeholders here, for example, the hunters, could do individual actions that, for example, the WWF project has defined. They could do these actions. We would somehow prove if they have done these actions. They would get some money for it, and they would also get a token. And with that token, after a certain period of time, they would be able, after measurement of the impact goals, they would be able to decide how that money is used. Do we want to build a new school? Do we want to build a pub? I don't know, whatever. But the money that they have in the bonus pot here is decided upon by the tokens that they get. So this is the, let's say, simple idea on how this incentive system could work. I was, to be honest, very overwhelmed by the results that we have from the hackathon. One, the interest. If you come here as WWF, you're also always not certain how is the reaction going to be from the card. Actually, we had the most interest in our challenge, so that's a nice thing for me. We had, by all of the participants, new ideas that we didn't think about in the first place, so that provided a little bit of a different twist of it, and I think the quality was really good. So that's why we also said we want to build upon the thinking that we have already, and from the concept perspective I think we're quite good. What we now need to do is build a pilot, test it out a little bit. There's a lot of uncertain things that we're also not sure about. Does this work? Does the local community even accept that? So there's a lot of things that we need to test, and that's why we want to build a pilot in 2019 for that. So that's the first idea, so what we want to do. We somehow need to provide more detail on how does the architecture really look like. That very complicated picture that you saw is a good starting point, but I think we need to have one more level of detail on that. We need to define a collaboration model, the project goals, and the actual hypothesis that we want to test, project plan kickoff, and also importantly, secure the funding. So this is preliminary, but that's the thinking that we have at the moment. And I'm very happy to take what we have as results from the hackathon already. I think there's a lot of good stuff that has already been done, and build upon that and have a real pilot and test the tokens in that ecosystem. That's already it. Very quick overview of what we wanted to do. Not sure if we planned for questions, but I'm very happy to answer any of the questions that you have.
Thank you very much.